I want to start by asking you like a really direct question. And I'm talking to you, the listener. Where are you right now?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
Right. I mean, not physically, obviously. I mean, professionally. Are you fresh on the job? Like just staring down your first real performance review?
Oh, that feeling of faking it till you make it. It's so real.
It is. Or maybe you're, 2 or 3 years in, you're feeling a little stuck, looking around and wondering how some of your peers they seem to be accelerating on this completely different track.
Yeah, well, you're just kind of maintaining.
Exactly, just keeping your head above water. Or maybe you're just incredibly ambitious, you've got these massive goals, but there's this nagging fear, that you might be wasting your foundational years on, well, the wrong things entirely.
It's a really profound kind of anxiety, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's that feeling that you're on a clock, but nobody has actually explained to you how the game is scored.
Yes, you're just told to, work hard,
Right.
be a team player.
Which is, let's be honest, incredibly vague advice for such a critical period of your life.
It's the worst advice. And usually when we talk about building a career, we use these really clean, tidy architectural metaphors.
Right, the whole climbing the ladder thing.
Yeah, climbing the ladder or mapping a trajectory. But then you step into the actual messy reality of the workplace and suddenly there is no map.
No, it's just spreadsheets and office politics.
And shifting deadlines
Exactly.
and really vague expectations. It's like you realize you aren't just following a pristine blueprint. You're having to draw the blueprint while you're simultaneously trying to pour the wet concrete.
Yeah, which is incredibly overwhelming for anyone.
It is. Which is exactly why the material we are doing a deep dive into today is so vital. It really strips away the abstract corporate jargon.
It actually hands you the missing blueprint.
Exactly. So today, our mission is to examine how you intentionally architect a career rather than just drifting through it and hoping for the best.
I'm really excited for this one.
Me too.
Yeah.
We are unpacking a really remarkable book today. It's titled What My First 5 Years at Work Actually Taught Me. And it's by Tolu Alao,
Who is widely known in professional circles as the Transformer.
The Transformer, which is such a cool title. And as we'll see, it's a title he absolutely earned through just incredible grit and strategy.
Oh, without a doubt.
We're going to trace his experiences across these really major heavy-hitting organizations. We're talking KPMG, Flour Mills of Nigeria, 7-Up Bottling Company, and PwC.
And what makes this text stand out, I think, is the grounded reality of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he isn't writing from some ivory tower. He's not offering abstract leadership theory that sounds good on a TED stage, but fails in an office.
Right. He's writing from the muddy trenches of his own first decade of work. He actually lived this stuff.
We really did. And there's this quote in the foreword. It was written by Titus Yakubu Gatto, a business transformation leader, and I think it just perfectly anchors everything we're going to discuss today.
Oh, I love this quote. Go ahead.
He writes, the first 5 years of a career are not a waiting room. They are the foundation.
Not a waiting room. I honestly can't stop thinking about that phrase.
It hits hard, doesn't it?
It does. Because if we're honest, that is exactly how so many people treat their early career. Like a giant corporate waiting room.
You take a ticket.
You take a ticket, you sit in the lobby, you do the tasks you're handed, you try not to make a mess, and you just passively wait for someone in management to call your name and hand you a promotion.
It's a very common trap, yeah.
Yeah.
You assume that tenure equals advancement.
Right. Just surviving for 2 years means you get a gold star.
Exactly. You assume that just by being there for 2 years, you're owed the next level.
Yeah.
But the core theme underlying all of Tolu's work is this concept of compounding.
Compounding. Say more about that.
Well, what you build early, your operational habits, your baseline standards, the way you interact with people, it doesn't just add up. It compounds. It multiplies over the rest of your career.
So it's not just a linear progression.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the real currency you are building in these first 5 years isn't just a list of technical skills. The currency is trust.
Trust, man, that really is the magic word here. But before you can get to the high-level strategy of where you can strategize about negotiating more money or, taking on massive leadership roles, you have to establish a behavioral baseline that actually earns that trust.
Right. You can't skip the foundational steps.
You just can't. So let's start right at the bedrock, the friction between what's easy and what's required.
This is where Tolu introduces us to a fantastic, very revealing story from around 2019.
Oh, the Six Sigma story.
Yeah, the Six Sigma story. So he was working full-time as an engineer at Flour Mills of Nigeria. Now, working at a massive manufacturing plant like that is already a demanding job.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It really is. But he decided, on top of his regular duties, that he needed to earn his certified Six Sigma Green Belt from the American Society for Quality, the ASQ.
And we really need to pause and establish the context here for the listener, because this isn't just like signing up for a breezy weekend seminar where you get a little certificate for showing up.
Oh, absolutely not.
Six Sigma, for those who might not know, is a brutally rigorous set of methodologies for process improvement. It's about eliminating defects, and it involves heavy, complex statistical analysis.
And to make it even harder, at the time Tolu decided to do this, there was no official ASQ training center in Nigeria.
None at all.
Zero. He had no classroom, he had no cohort of peers to study with, he had no instructor to bail him out or explain a concept if he got stuck on, a complex statistical control chart.
He was completely on an island, like literally ordering textbooks and practice exams, sitting at his desk at 11 p.m. after an exhausting full day on the plant floor trying to teach himself advanced statistics.
Just brutal.
And he writes about failing his first practice exam terribly, just totally bombing it. He actually asked himself, using this great bit of Nigerian slang, he asked, why do I like wahala like this?
Wahala meaning trouble.
Exactly. Why do I like trouble? Why am I actively inviting this unnecessary difficulty into my life?
It's the universal question, isn't it? The ambitious professional staring at their computer screen in the dark hours of the night. Why do the hard thing?
Why not just close the laptop and go to sleep?
Right, and the psychology here is critical to understand. Human beings naturally default to the path of least resistance.
We're lazy by design.
Biologically. Our brains are wired to conserve energy. We want the highest reward for the lowest caloric output. The problem is that in a modern professional context, the path of least resistance leads directly to average results.
Right, because if a task is easy, everyone in your department is already doing it.
Precisely. In the first 5 years of your career, you look around and realize your title is roughly the same as your peers. You all went to similar schools. Your experience gap is negligible.
You're all just kind of a blur to management.
Exactly. So what actually differentiates you to the people making decisions about the future of the company? It is the willingness to intentionally seek out and conquer the things that others are actively avoiding because of the friction involved.
See, I've always thought of this through the lens of muscle hypertrophy. Like, anyone who has ever been to a gym knows that muscles don't grow just because you picked up a weight.
Right, you have to break them down.
Yeah, they only grow when they are pushed past their current capacity. If you go to the gym and pick up a weight that is incredibly easy for you and easy for everyone else, you aren't stretching your boundary.
You're just moving your arms around.
Exactly, you're just burning some time. Doing hard things like studying Six Sigma at 11 p.m. is professional hypertrophy. You are literally forcing your professional capacity to adapt to a heavier load.
That is a perfect analogy. And the beautiful thing about that adaptation is that it's permanent.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, Tolu notes that when you stretch that professional boundary, it stays stretched. He actually quotes Ralph Waldo Emerson in the text. The mind, once stretched by a new idea, never returns to its original dimensions.
I love that.
But there's an even deeper strategic layer to this that we have to talk about. This brings up the economic concept of category advantage.
Category advantage. Okay, let's play with this. Because when you're the only one doing this incredibly hard thing, the math of competition totally shifts.
It really does.
It feels like you aren't just getting a slight edge over 100 peers. It's more like you're stepping into a totally different arena where there are only like 3 people competing. You're creating a category of 1.
That is exactly the mechanism at play. Most people think that doing a hard thing gives you a 10% edge over the person sitting next to you. But Tolu argues the rewards are disproportionate.
How disproportionate?
Well, when you were the only engineer on the floor who earned a complex international certification entirely through self-study, you don't just edge out the competition. You remove yourself from the main competition pool entirely. Winner takes all.
Wow.
When the director looks for someone to lead a complex new initiative, the competition isn't against 100 people anymore. It's against the 2 other people who have demonstrated that specific level of grit. You've changed the numerator and the denominator of your career prospects.
So if you're listening to this right now and wondering how to actually apply this tomorrow, don't overthink it. Look around your department. Identify the one project, the one legacy system, the one certification that everyone complains about and actively avoids.
Yes, find the friction.
Write it down.
Right.
That is your target. Set a 90-day window to make real, measurable progress on it.
And crucially, Tolu advises telling an accountability partner.
Oh, to keep you honest.
Right, but it's not just about encouragement. It creates social friction against quitting. Your brain treats public declarations very differently from private ones.
That makes total sense. If I privately decide to study for a certification and I quit, only I know, I can rationalize it.
Oh, we're great at rationalizing.
We really are. But when someone else expects you to follow through, quitting suddenly carries a social cost. You are leveraging your own desire to save face to push yourself through the friction.
It's a brilliant hack.
It really is. Okay, so doing the hard, high-friction things gets you noticed. It separates you from the pack. But you can't just be the person who does one hard thing and then coasts.
No, you definitely can't.
There's a day-to-day baseline you also have to hit just to stay in the room. And that brings us to the concept of showing up. Now, showing up sounds so absurdly basic, like, congratulations, you found the building, here is your gold star.
It does sound basic, but Tolu makes a very sharp, vital distinction between physical attendance and actual presence.
Okay, break that down.
To understand the mechanism of showing up, let's look at his morning routine at Flour Mills. His first Employee of the Month award didn't come from some massive million-dollar breakthrough. It came from a daily habit. He arrived at 8 a.m. before the plant floor filled up and the chaos started, and he sat down and read the previous day's production reports.
We should probably explain what that actually means in a manufacturing context. A production report isn't just a summary, it's the pulse of the factory.
Exactly.
By reading it, he knew exactly which machinery broke down on the night shift, which packaging lines were running behind schedule, what the yield percentages were, and which operators had flagged safety or quality issues.
Precisely. So imagine the alternative. The alternative is showing up at 9 a.m. for the morning briefing, grabbing a coffee, and sitting down waiting to be told what happened.
Passive attendance.
Right, that is passive attendance. But because Tolu read those reports at 8 a.m., by the time the briefing started, he was already 3 moves ahead of the conversation. When a manager raised a problem about a specific line, Tolu wasn't hearing about it for the first time.
Because he already had the context.
He had the context, yes. So he could offer a solution, or at least a highly informed question.
He wasn't just attending the meeting, he was actively prepared to shape it. And doing that every single day established a baseline of predictable excellence. Like later in his career, when he was at 7-Up Bottling Company, he was managing over 20 direct and indirect reports across multiple facilities.
That's a massive scope.
It is. He had to consolidate huge amounts of data. And people in the organization knew that if Tolu said his Friday reports were coming, they were in your inbox on Thursday afternoon. Every time.
Yeah, predictability is huge.
But okay, I have to pause here and genuinely push back.
Okay, let's hear.
Because look, we are in an era of quiet quitting and setting firm boundaries for a reason. If I'm a young professional listening to this, I might be thinking, wait a minute. If I come in an hour early every day, prep before everyone else, and constantly deliver a day early, aren't I just painting a massive target on my back for more unpaid labor?
That's a fair point.
Isn't this just promoting toxic hustle culture where the boss expects you to bleed for the company?
That is a very real, very valid fear. And it raises an important question about sustainability and boundaries. But what Tolu is advocating for is absolutely not toxic hustle culture.
Okay, what's the difference?
Notice the nuance here. He isn't saying you should sleep under your desk. He isn't saying you should sacrifice your weekends, cancel plans with your family, or perform exhausting heroics to save projects at the 11th hour. He defines showing up as being slightly better prepared than the situation strictly requires.
Slightly better prepared. Okay, not moving mountains every Tuesday, just reading the briefing doc before the briefing.
Exactly. It's about predictability, not martyrdom. Occasional heroics are actually terrible for a career.
Really? Why?
Because they're exhausting for you. And they set erratic, unrealistic expectations for your managers. If you save the day by pulling an all-nighter, your boss starts expecting all-nighters. Sustainable, showing up, reading the agenda, knowing the context, tracking your open tasks beats extreme, erratic hustle every single time.
It builds a reputation of total reliability without destroying your mental health.
Precisely.
It's the difference between being a reliable engine and being a firework. Like, a firework is spectacular, but it burns out in 5 seconds. An engine just quietly does the work every day.
That's a great way to look at it.
So to the listener, if you want to integrate this, start small. For your next few meetings, just make it a rule. Read the agenda in advance, Find one data point, one specific question, or one observation to bring. You don't have to dominate the meeting. Just don't be a passive spectator.
And audit your open commitments. If you told someone 3 weeks ago you would send them a file and you forgot, track it down and send it. Close the loop.
And there's this tiny, brilliant tactic he mentions for making this work visible without bragging.
Oh, the Friday summary.
Yes. Send a brief end-of-week summary to your manager, literally 3 to 5 bullet points. Here's what I completed this week. Here is what is in progress. Here is where I am blocked. It takes 3 minutes to write.
But psychologically, it removes your manager's anxiety about what you're doing. And removing your manager's anxiety is the fastest way to build the trust that leads to autonomy.
So true. Okay, so we've poured the concrete. We've laid a rock-solid foundation. You are doing the hard, high-friction things, and you are reliably showing up and closing the loop. But you're also navigating a massive influx of new information. How do you process all the experience you are gaining?
Right, because it's not enough to just be reliable. You have to be absorbing.
Exactly. This leads us to the engine of growth. How you learn and the standard of excellence you set for your output. Let's examine the learning aspect first.
The biggest trap early in a career is treating learning as something that only happens in a classroom or, during a formal corporate onboarding program.
Right. People think, okay, onboarding is over, the learning phase is done, and now the execution phase begins.
But Tolu completely shatters this idea. He tells the story of his 20-month rotation as a management trainee at flour mills.
A 20-month rotation is a massive investment of time.
It's huge. He rotated through everything. Wheat operations, where the raw material comes in, quality control, where they test the output, the power plant, which keeps the whole facility running, and even the commercial sales side.
Wow.
But the key isn't just that he was present in those departments. The key is how he extracted knowledge from them. He didn't just stand there with a clipboard and passively watch the supervisors do their jobs. He kept a detailed notebook.
And the behavioral detail that really matters here is the nature of the questions he asked.
Yes.
He didn't just ask his supervisors what they decided to do. He relentlessly asked them why they decided to do it.
That is such a crucial pivot. Because if a machine breaks, asking what did you do just gives you a repair manual. Oh, I turned this wrench.
Yeah.
But asking why did you decide to turn that wrench instead of shutting down the line, that gives you the operational logic.
He was mapping the underlying decision-making architecture of the entire business.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is the stark difference between passive and active learning. Fast learners, according to the framework Tolu lays out, do 3 specific things. First, they learn actively. When they read a report or witness a failure, they don't just file it away. They ask, what does this new piece of information change about the decisions I need to make tomorrow?
Okay, what's the second thing?
Second, they connect knowledge across domains. They don't silo their learning. They take the rigid systems thinking they learned in the engineering department and bring it into the highly fluid environment of commercial sales.
That's powerful.
And third, they apply what they learn immediately, long before they feel fully ready or qualified.
I think of it like the difference between reading a recipe and actually cooking the meal.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, passive learning is sitting on your couch reading a French cookbook. You can memorize the ingredients, you can know exactly what temperature the oven should be, you can even ace a written test on the recipe. But active learning is getting into the kitchen, chopping the onions, realizing your pan is too hot and you burnt the garlic, throwing it out, and adjusting the seasoning on the fly.
You have to endure the mess of applying the knowledge.
You really do. If you wait until you feel perfectly ready to cook, you will starve.
That is exactly it. The friction of the mistake is where the actual learning is encoded in your brain. And to operationalize this, you don't need a complex system. Keep a simple weekly learning journal. Just ask yourself 3 questions on a Friday afternoon. What is the most surprising thing I learned this week? What does it mean for my role? And how will I apply it next week?
Simple but effective.
And also, proactively find a senior professional in your company whose work you admire and ask them for 30 minutes. Don't ask them for a promotion. Ask them to explain their process. Ask them how they think. People are generally incredibly flattered by this and love to share their mental models, but you have to be the one to initiate.
Which feeds right into the output side of the equation. If active learning is how you ingest the environment, excellence is what you exhale, is how you translate that internal knowledge into external results.
And Tolu defines excellence in a way that really struck me. He says excellence is a standard you choose for yourself when absolutely no one is watching.
He shares a brilliant, highly technical example from his time at 7-Up Bottling Company to illustrate this, right?
He does. His direct brief from his manager was to build a utility cost driver for his immediate scope of work.
Okay, let's unpack what a utility cost driver actually is, because it highlights why this was so difficult. A bottling plant uses massive amounts of electricity, water, and gas. A utility cost driver is an analytical model that tracks how much of those utilities are consumed per unit of product produced.
Right. It helps you figure out if a specific production line is wasting energy, which obviously directly impacts the bottom line.
It's highly complex data modeling. Now, Tolu could have just built this model for the few lines he was responsible for, handed it in, and gotten a pat on the back. Task completed. But as he looked at the data, he recognized a massive systemic gap across the entire company.
Oh yeah. The plant managers across the country were reporting their utility costs in completely inconsistent, fractured formats. Some were using different Excel templates, some were calculating variances differently. This inconsistency allowed inefficiencies to hide in the noise.
So without being asked, without a mandate from upper management, he took it upon himself to build a standardized national utility cost model that unified the reporting for 34 different bottling lines across the country.
34 lines. That's a huge undertaking.
And the result of standardizing that data was that it improved reporting accuracy by 50%.
And remember, he wasn't asked for a national model. He just saw the gap, realized his capability exceeded the baseline request, and decided his personal standard dictated that he fixed the larger problem. And this circles back to the concept of compounding trust.
Every single piece of work you output is a data point for your reputation.
Exactly.
But again, I'm going to play devil's advocate here because I can hear the exhaustion in the listener's head. If I am constantly going above and beyond, if my boss asks for a local spreadsheet and I spend my entire weekend building a unified national model for 34 bottling lines, won't I just step on the toes of other managers?
Probably, yes.
And more importantly, how do I avoid burning out and resenting my company for taking advantage of my excellence?
It's a highly valid concern. If you interpret excellence as always doing 10 times more than asked, you will absolutely burn out. And you will probably annoy your colleagues who feel like you are overstepping. But that misrepresents what excellence looks like in daily practice.
Okay, what does it look like?
Excellence isn't infinite refinement. It is not spending your entire weekend tweaking the font sizes on a slide deck or building massive national models every single day. Tolu suggests a very specific, contained habit. Before you submit any piece of work, an email, a report, a presentation, pause and ask yourself one singular question. What is one thing that would make this notably better?
Just one thing.
Just one thing. It's a 15-minute habit, not a weekend sacrificing endeavor. Maybe notably better means adding an executive summary bullet point at the top of a long email so your boss doesn't have to scroll. Maybe it means double-checking the variance formula in a spreadsheet one last time. Maybe it's just clarifying an ambiguous sentence. You find one friction point, you smooth it out, and then you submit it.
So it's not sacrificing your life, it's adding one final layer of polish that compoundingly separates your work from everyone else's.
Exactly.
So try this. For your next few deliverables, just build in a 10-minute buffer before your deadline. Use that buffer exclusively to ask what makes this notably better, and write down your personal standard for your top tasks. Decide right now. My personal standard for meeting notes is that they always include a clear owner and a deadline for every action item. Put it in writing so you can hold yourself to it when you're tired.
That is exactly how you build the engine. But here is the critical pivot. You can have the best foundation, you can do the hard things, show up flawlessly, learn actively, and deliver excellent polished work. But work does not happen in a vacuum. It happens with, through, and often in spite of other human beings.
Yes. Which brings us to the currency of your career. If you don't understand how to navigate relationships and deploy empathy, your brilliant technical skills are going to hit a concrete wall very early on.
They really will.
Let's look at perspective 5, relationships. Because I think most ambitious young professionals completely misunderstand networking.
Oh, networking is so misunderstood. Tolu points out a very common, very destructive trap early in a career, treating relationships purely as upward transactional utility. We are taught that networking means putting on a suit, finding the most senior executive in the room, and trying to impress them with an elevator pitch so they can magically pull us up the corporate ladder.
It feels slimy because it is slimy. It's treating people like vending machines. I put in a compliment, you output a promotion.
Right. But Tolu's absolute best career opportunities didn't come from upward transactional networking. In 2021, he landed a major, highly impactful role at 7-Up. But he didn't find it on a job board, and he didn't pitch the CEO for it.
How did he get it?
It came to him because a peer, someone lateral to him, whom he had simply worked well with and helped out previously, was in a room where Tolu's name came up, and that peer vouched for him.
This illustrates the immense power of paying it forward without calculating an immediate return. True networking is lateral. It's helping a colleague debug a macro in their spreadsheet at 9 p.m. when you have your own deadline, just because they're stuck.
It's taking an hour on a Saturday to coach a junior staff member through a difficult client conversation. What young professionals often forget is that senior leaders are incredibly observant. They don't just watch how you interact with them, they watch how you treat the people who have absolutely no power to promote you.
That is so true. If you are warm and charming to the director, but you are dismissive, short-tempered, or arrogant with the junior analyst or the administrative assistant, you immediately read as self-interested and untrustworthy. The director knows your charm is fake.
Exactly. And this principle of non-transactional relationship building extends heavily into how we behave online.
I am so glad you brought this up because I want to zoom in on Tolu's take on the digital relationship. Because let's be honest, LinkedIn and professional social media can often feel like a deeply toxic festival of humble bragging.
Oh, it really can be.
It's always, I'm humbled and honored to announce that I breathed oxygen today.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
But Tolu argues that your digital footprint is not just a digital CV, and it shouldn't be a notice board for your ego. It is a living, searchable record of how you think, how you synthesize information, and how you show up for others professionally.
He makes this point that I thought was brilliantly sharp. Posting every single minor award or certificate you get the exact moment it happens actually signals deep insecurity. It feels like you're desperate for external validation. Instead, the people who build real, durable trust online are the ones who engage thoughtfully with other people's ideas.
If you apply the same standard of behavior to your digital presence as you do your physical presence, it makes perfect sense. You wouldn't walk into a physical networking room, grab a megaphone, shout about your new certificate for 2 minutes, and then walk out without listening to anyone.
But that is exactly how most people use LinkedIn.
It is. Tolu suggests a different approach. Engage in meaningful conversation. Comment insightfully on someone else's analysis. Share a useful article and synthesize the 3 key takeaways, making it about the value of the information, not about how smart you are for reading it.
Make other people feel seen. If you want to put this into practice, don't just mindlessly scroll. Reach out to a peer or a junior colleague this week, someone you haven't spoken to in a while. Offer them help or just check in with absolutely zero agenda.
And another tactical tip Tolu gives, send a 1-line follow-up message after significant interactions. If someone gave a great presentation, send a Teams message. Hey, your breakdown of the Q3 data was incredibly clear, really helped me understand the bottleneck, thanks.
Nobody does this. If you do, you will be remembered.
Which transitions us perfectly into perspective 6, empathy. Now, empathy is heavily miscategorized in the corporate world. It is constantly dismissed as a soft skill, something nice to have, but not strictly necessary if your data is good. Tolu forcefully argues that empathy is actually a hard professional multiplier.
The story from the book that really cemented this for me happened while he was at Flour Mills. Tolu is pushing these process improvements on the manufacturing floor. He has crunched the numbers. He has perfect data. The logic of his new process is absolutely bulletproof. But the team on the floor is resisting him at every single turn.
They're fighting him.
Yeah, they are dragging their feet, ignoring the new protocols, and finding reasons why it won't work. He's getting incredibly frustrated, thinking, look at the numbers, the math is right here. Then a senior colleague pulls him aside and diagnoses the real problem.
What did they say?
He says, Tolu, they aren't resistant to your ideas. They are resistant to feeling like an outsider in a process that fundamentally changes how their team works.
Wow. What's fascinating here is the realization that being technically correct is utterly insufficient if you are trying to drive change. Empathy is the mechanism for wielding influence when you have zero formal authority to force compliance.
I love to think of empathy as the UI UX, the user interface and user experience of your ideas, your data, your rigorous logic, your financial models. That is the back-end code. It might be flawless, bug-free code, But if the user interface is terrible, if it's abrasive, condescending, or completely ignores the emotional reality of the user, no one is going to adopt your software. Empathy is designing a clean, intuitive, respectful interface for your intelligence.
That's a brilliant way to frame it.
Right.
Because if the UI makes the plant worker feel stupid or makes them feel like their 10 years of tactile experience is being dismissed by a spreadsheet, they will actively look for bugs in your code just to prove your software doesn't work.
So true.
So Tolu had to completely change his approach. He didn't just email them a finished process document. He walked out onto the noisy factory floor. He stood next to the operators. He pointed to a bottleneck and asked, "You've been running this machine for a decade. If you designed this workflow, where would you put the staging area?"
He brought them in.
Yes. By taking their deep tactical knowledge and mapping his financial data onto it, he transformed them from targets of his change into co-architects of the solution. The resistance vanished because they owned the new process.
Empathy is also crucial for managing up. We always think about empathy flowing downward, but you need to deploy it upward too. Your manager has intense pressures that you don't see pressure from their own boss. Conflicting departmental priorities, budget cuts. Empathy means before you walk into their office, you ask yourself, what does my manager need to feel, know, or believe by the end of this interaction? If you know they are stressed about a board deadline, empathy is bringing them a synthesized solution, not just dumping a list of 5 new problems on their desk for them to solve. So how do you practice this? Pick one working relationship right now that feels stuck or full of friction. Stop asking what you need from that person and spend 10 minutes writing down what they might need that you aren't providing. Are they feeling insecure about their authority? Are they overwhelmed? And in your next few meetings, practice listening for the subtext. What is the thing people are dancing around but not actually saying out loud? That is where empathy does its best, most profitable work.
Okay, let's take a breath and look at where we are. You have built a foundation of reliability. You have an engine of active learning and excellence. You have built a network of lateral trust, and you are wielding empathy to drive change. You are a highly competent, trusted professional. Now what?
Now we move to the leverage points.
Exactly. How do you deploy all that accumulated trust to massively accelerate your trajectory? This brings us to risk and money. Let's start by looking at perspective 7, risk. Because the way Tolu redefines risk is a total paradigm shift for most people. It really is. We are conditioned to think of risk as danger. We think of it as jumping out of an airplane without checking the parachute. Tolu completely reframes it. He says risk is simply the necessary cost you pay to access an opportunity that is not available on the safe, predictable path.
And he makes the argument that the most genuinely dangerous thing you can do in your first 5 years is take no risks. Let's look at his massive pivot in August 2020. At this point, he is a highly regarded, deeply trusted engineer in manufacturing operations at flour mills. That is his comfort zone. He knows the machines, he knows the people, he knows the data.
Right.
Then an opportunity arises to move completely out of operations and into the commercial function, reporting directly to the sales director.
We have to recognize how terrifying that is. He knew next to nothing about commercial sales forecasting, trade marketing, or distributor management. He didn't even know the acronyms they used in the meetings. To go from being the smartest, most reliable expert in the room to being the beginner who has to ask basic questions is a massive hit to the ego.
The safer choice, the comfortable choice, was obviously to stay in manufacturing and wait for a senior engineering promotion. But he took the leap into sales. And the result is staggering. Within 6 months, he completely revolutionized their sales reporting systems.
Because he brought something they didn't have. He brought engineering systems thinking to commercial data.
Let's actually unpack what that means. How does an engineer look at sales?
Well, a traditional salesperson looks at a drop in revenue and sees a relationship problem, or maybe a pricing issue. It's often reactive. But an engineer looks at a factory as a system of inputs, bottlenecks, and outputs. If a machine fails, you don't just yell at the machine, you do a root cause analysis.
Okay, so applying that to sales.
When Tolu moved to sales, he treated the distributor network like a factory line. He looked at the sales pipeline as a system. Where exactly was the bottleneck? Was it in inventory dispatch? Was it in order processing? By applying rigorous root cause bottleneck analysis to sales data, he uncovered inefficiencies that the traditional commercial team couldn't see because they didn't have his mental models. The risk paid off massively, not because he became a smooth-talking salesman, but because he deployed his unique assets in a new domain.
But I want to inject some caution here. How do we differentiate between a calculated, strategic career risk like Tolu's and just a reckless, impulsive jump? I mean, I shouldn't just quit my stable job tomorrow and invest my life savings in a crypto startup because I read that taking risks is good.
Absolutely not. Recklessness is taking a risk without a thesis. Tolu provides a very rigorous, cold-blooded 3-question framework for evaluating whether a career risk is worth taking. First, what is the worst realistic outcome, and can I recover from it? Notice he says realistic.
Not the worst possible outcome.
Right. If he failed in the sales role, the worst realistic outcome was that he'd have a slightly bruised ego and he could transition back into a manufacturing role, either at flour mills or elsewhere, because his track record there was already solid. That is a fully recoverable failure.
Second question. What is the specific definition of success and what is the timeline to evaluate it? You can't just jump and say, I hope it goes well. You have to say, if I haven't mastered the core reporting metrics in 6 months, I need to pivot.
And the third question, which I think is the ultimate safety net, is what will I learn regardless of the outcome? Even if Tolu failed in sales, he would have learned how commercial revenue is generated, which would make him a vastly superior manufacturing engineer later on because he'd finally understand what the customer actually needs. If the guaranteed learning is significant enough, the downside of the risk is heavily mitigated.
Staying in one specific function for 5 to 10 years feels incredibly safe, but Tolu warns against building a deep but narrow profile. If you're deeply specialized in one specific legacy software and the industry pivots away from that software, your narrow profile makes you incredibly vulnerable. Cross-functional moves, moving from engineering to sales, from marketing to finance, are the absolute best early career risks because they build a wide, resilient foundation.
And listen, if a major cross-functional job move isn't available to you right now, you can still practice this muscle by taking micro risks. Speak up in a meeting where you usually stay silent, but do it with one highly prepared observation. That is a visibility risk. Or go to your manager and request a short second or a joint project with a completely different department. Start building that cross-functional perspective incrementally.
Which leads us perfectly into the other major leverage point, and honestly the one that causes the most anxiety. Perspective 8.
Money.
And let me tell you, this section of the source material pulls absolutely zero punches. It gets very real, very fast.
It really does. Money is often treated as a taboo topic in career advice, heavily wrapped in euphemisms. But Tolu tackles the cold, hard math of it. He states plainly that he entirely self-funded his MBA, his project management professional certification, and his Six Sigma belt. Every single one of those major credentials came out of his own pocket.
And the immediate obvious question is, why? Why on earth would you pay thousands of dollars for that yourself when massive corporations have learning and development budgets? Shouldn't you just wait for the company to sponsor you?
You can wait, but you will be waiting based on a fundamental misunderstanding of corporate structures. Company L&D budgets are designed to optimize you for the job you currently have or to fill an immediate, desperately needed gap in the organization. They're investing in their operational efficiency.
That makes sense.
But you need to invest in the career you want 5 or 10 years down the line, which might be in a completely different industry. That gap between what your current company needs from you today and what your ambition requires of you tomorrow is yours to fund. Always.
And we have to look at the brutal economic math he presents, especially regarding inflation. Tolu references the economic reality he was operating in, specifically Nigeria, where inflation was frequently exceeding 20%, coupled with massive currency devaluation.
This forces an incredibly uncomfortable realization about how we view our compensation. Most people look at their nominal salary, the actual number on the paycheck. If you get a 10% nominal raise at the end of the year, you feel great, you celebrate. But if you live in an economy with 25% inflation, you did not get a raise. You took a massive 15% pay cut. Your actual purchasing power shrank dramatically. Tolu insists that you must strip away the illusion of the nominal number and negotiate your worth based on real purchasing power and true market value.
Okay, I am going to push back hard here. On behalf of every entry-level listener currently having a panic attack about their rent, it is really easy to say, fund your own development and invest heavily in your human capital when you are an established professional making a massive executive salary. But let's get granular. What if you are on an entry-level salary? Let's say 50,000 naira a month, or the equivalent entry-level wage wherever you are listening. When you barely have enough money to cover your rent, groceries, and the bus fare to get to the office, how on earth are you supposed to magically self-fund an expensive international certification? I'm looking at his 15% rule for professional development, and realistically, in a hyperinflationary economy, carving out 15% isn't just a budget trim. It's deciding to skip meals. It sounds totally detached from reality.
That is the most common and frankly the most painful pushback to this framework. And it's entirely fair. The friction is incredibly high. But Tolu's counter-argument is anchored in behavioral psychology, not just accountancy. Financial management is about establishing a neurological habit, not about managing absolute amounts of wealth. His argument is brutal but true. If you do not build the painful habit of intentionally allocating your money when you make $50,000, you will absolutely not magically develop that discipline when you make $500,000. Lifestyle creep will consume every single extra cent. You will just buy a nicer car and rent a more expensive apartment, and you will still claim you don't have the budget for a course.
So he provides a very rigid, specific framework to force this discipline. The 5-5-1-5-1-1-5 breakdown, let's walk through it.
He suggests structurally allocating your salary the moment it hits your account before you even look at it. 55% is locked for absolute essentials: rent, food, transport to work. 15% goes to savings and building an emergency fund, because without an emergency fund, you can't take those career risks we just talked about. Then another 15% is entirely ruthlessly dedicated to professional development. That is the non-negotiable line item for funding your future self. Then 10% is discretionary fund, dinners out, and 5% is for giving or miscellaneous expenses.
Dedicating 15% of a tiny paycheck to professional development hurts. But the justification he gives is the ROI, the return on investment.
Exactly. Look at the timeline. Over 10 years, by ruthlessly funding his own learning, taking the courses, and gaining the certifications, Tolu's earning capacity grew by 900%. I want you to really think about that, Matt. Show me a blue chip stock, a mutual fund, or a piece of real estate that reliably yields a 900% return in a decade. You can. In your 20s and early 30s, absolutely no financial instrument on earth beats the compounding interest of your own human capital. The money you spend making your brain more capable is the highest yielding asset you will ever own.
That reframing is so powerful. It changes a course fee from an expense into a high yield investment. So, action item. Look at your next paycheck. Divide it up using this framework. See how much that 15% development fund actually is. Put it in a separate account. And secondly, do the research on the actual current market rates for your specific role. Don't rely on your company's internal bands. Know your external value so you can build a factual, data-driven case for your next negotiation based on purchasing power, not just a standard 3% cost of living bump.
Which brings us, finally, to the culmination of the entire First Five framework. We have reached the pinnacle. Think about the architecture we've built. If you have been doing the hard things, showing up prepared, learning actively, demanding excellence of your outputs, building non-transactional lateral relationships, wielding empathy, taking cross-functional risks, and investing your money in your brain, you are inevitably, unstoppably going to arrive at a point where the environment around you shifts. People start looking to you, and that triggers perspective 9, leadership, and perspective 10, transformation.
Let's tackle leadership first, because the grand myth of the corporate world is that leadership is a magical crown you get handed when HR finally updates your title and gives you a corner office. You think, once I am a manager, I will start leading. Tolu destroys that sequence. He says leadership starts long before the title ever materializes.
Let's look at the ultimate test of this, his experience at 7-Up. He was tasked with designing and executing a massive training program for 150 experienced plant staff. We're talking about hardened mechanics, machine operators, and shift supervisors. People who had been turning wrenches on those specific lines longer than Tolu had been alive. And crucially, he had absolutely zero formal authority over them. They did not report to him. He could not fire them. He could not promote them. He could not dock their pay. So how do you walk into a room full of 150 veterans who know you have no power over them and actually lead them to change their behavior? You certainly don't do it by acting like a boss. You lead through exhaustively prepared knowledge, profound, demonstrated respect for their tactile expertise, and taking absolute ownership of the outcome. He didn't issue commands. He acted as a facilitator of their shared success. He synthesized the data they couldn't see, paired it with the mechanical realities they lived every day, and removed the obstacles in their way. And the result of that kind of leadership, compliance scores across the plant improved by 20% and productivity shot up by 30%. Leadership early in a career is simply the act of taking ownership.
I love that. Leadership isn't a crown, it's a muscle. It's a muscle you build by looking around the room and picking up the heavy things that no one else wants to carry. You've been in those meetings, the meeting is going in circles, everyone is complaining, time is running out, and nobody is taking charge. Leadership is stepping up, without being asked and saying, okay, let me synthesize what we've agreed on. I will take the notes, I will map the next steps, and I'll send them out by 3 p.m.
And what's fascinating here is the concept of leading upward. We talked about managing up with empathy earlier, but leading upward is a step further. Leading upward is aggressively removing surprises for your manager. It's anticipating the question the director is going to ask your boss and giving your boss the data beforehand. The fundamental, inescapable truth Tolu highlights is that the title follows the behavior. If you are waiting for the promotion to start acting like a leader, you are signaling to the organization that you aren't ready. You will be waiting forever.
So the move here is simple. Find a recurring meeting you are a part of and volunteer to own the follow-up actions. Track the items, follow up with the assignees, and close the loops. Build the muscle, and that muscle of ownership prepares you for the final, perhaps most daunting perspective, transformation, perspective 10. Because no matter how well you build this architecture, careers are not straight, uninterrupted lines upward.
They are absolutely not. They are full of fractures and pivots. And Tolu's journey is the ultimate embodiment of this. Fast forward to 2024. He makes a dramatic, jarring pivot. He leaves the manufacturing industry entirely and joins PwC as a senior consultant in their corporate finance and strategy practice. Let's really think about the gravity of this. He has spent 8 years building deep, proven, highly respected expertise in manufacturing operations and commercial supply chains. He is a master of that domain, and he walks away from it to enter a completely new, highly intense consulting environment. Different clients, a different pace of work, a completely different corporate language.
He essentially forced himself to be a beginner again.
Yes, and this wasn't even his first time doing it. Remember the very beginning of the story. He started his career at KPMG in assurance and auditing, learning the rigorous logic of reading financial statements. Then, he left that highly prestigious Big Four role to become a management trainee at flour mills. From the outside, leaving a Big Four firm to be a trainee in a flour factory looks like career suicide. It looks like a massive step backward.
People must have thought he was absolutely crazy. You're leaving KPMG to go wear a hard hat.
Exactly. But from the inside, looking at his own strategy, he knew he wasn't stepping backward. He was stepping laterally because he was carrying what he calls transferable assets.
We really need to unpack transferable assets because this is the secret sauce that makes massive career pivots possible without losing your momentum.
A transferable asset is a fundamental mode of thinking or a core capability that is entirely domain agnostic. It works anywhere. When Tolu moved from KPMG auditing to flour mills manufacturing, he didn't try to bring specific audit methodology to a factory floor. That would be useless. He brought the underlying analytical rigor. He brought the trained ability to trace cause and consequence through complex flows of information, and he applied that exact same mental machinery to a factory production line. When he moved from flour mills to consulting at PwC, he didn't bring flour recipes. He brought the structured root cause problem solving of an engineer.
He brought systems thinking, the ability to look at any messy situation as a series of inputs, processes, bottlenecks, and outputs. That asset works in a flour mill, it works in a telecom company's supply chain, and it works in a corporate strategy meeting. Your assets are not your current job title. Your assets are the specific, highly trained ways your brain attacks a problem.
Exactly. And the professionals who thrive over a 40-year career don't just stay in one lane, they constantly reinvent themselves as industries shift. But to execute that transformation, you have to possess the humility to accept the intense discomfort of being a beginner again. You have to be patient with your own lack of context, but act with incredible speed to learn the new language.
So, to apply this, sit down and map your top 3 transferable assets right now. Strip away your industry jargon. What fundamental modes of thinking are distinctly yours? Are you a systems thinker? Are you a master of synthesizing chaotic data into simple narratives? Identify the asset. And second, find someone in your extended network who made a massive nonlinear career pivot, say they went from marketing to finance or from engineering to HR. Ask them specifically what mental models they carried over. Their answer will be an absolute goldmine for how you frame your own future loops.
We have covered a staggering amount of ground today. We have gone from the gritty, granular reality of reading production reports at 8 a.m. all the way to the macro, decades-long strategy of career reinvention and asset transfer. But as Tolu so powerfully states in the book, reading this without taking action is just research. It's not growth, it's just entertainment.
Which brings us to our final section, the 90-day master plan. Because Tolu doesn't just leave you inspired, he literally provides a blueprint in the appendix to execute this entire psychological and operational shift over the next 3 months.
It is incredibly structured, and the timeline is very deliberate. Why 90 days? because it is long enough to see compounding results, but short enough to maintain urgency. And the architecture of the plan matters. You don't do it all at once.
Right, you don't try to take a massive cross-functional risk on day 2 when your inbox is a disaster.
Exactly. The first 30 days are purely about fixing the baseline. It's about foundations. You pick your hard thing, that Six Sigma equivalent, and set a deadline. You fix your meeting prep so you are showing up predictably. And critically, you close every single overdue commitment. You clean the slate, you build that initial layer of trust, which creates the cognitive space for the bigger moves later.
Then the next 30 days shift to people and standards. This is when you reach out laterally to your peers with no agenda. You establish your personal quality standard and start executing the what makes this notably better 15-minute review. And this is the month you force yourself to implement the 551-515-1005 money framework, locking in your professional development fund.
And only then, in the final 30 days, do you execute the big moves. Because now you have the trust, the excellence, and the capital. Now you apply the 3-question risk framework and volunteer for that cross-functional project. Now you pick a stuck, high-friction relationship and fix it using empathy. You practice leadership by owning a meeting's actions, and you map your transferable assets for your future transformation. It is a sequenced, logical escalation of impact.
It strips away all the paralyzing mystery of what do I do with my career and breaks it down into Tuesday morning tasks. It is just so actionable. The first 5 years aren't a waiting room. They're a construction site for compounding habits. Doing hard things, showing up consistently, learning actively, paying it forward laterally, ruthlessly self-funding your brain, and having the courage to reinvent yourself.
It is a masterful framework for professional autonomy.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to chew on. Tolu mentions in the book a profound truth. Your reputation travels faster than you do, especially today in highly interconnected sectors. The junior colleague you helped or the administrative assistant you dismissively snapped at during your first job will inevitably show up as a gatekeeper or a decision maker at your fourth job.
It is a shockingly small professional world.
Exactly. So I want you to think about the rooms you aren't in right now. Think about the massive companies you haven't even applied to yet, the executive boardrooms you want to sit in, the completely different industries you haven't even considered entering. If your reputation is a living entity and it is already packing its bags and heading to those rooms long before you even arrive, what exactly is it whispering to the people waiting for you? Is it whispering that you are a reliable engine, deeply empathetic, and relentlessly excellent? Or is it whispering that you are transactional, erratic, unprepared, and prone to complaining when things get hard? Are you intentionally, deliberately scripting that whisper today?
That is a profound, uncomfortable question to sit with. And it circles right back to where we started. You are building a foundation. Every email is a brick.
Right back to the bedrock. You are no longer in the waiting room. You are on the construction site. It is time to pick up the tools. So, your final task. Commit to your first 30-day action right now. Write it down. Text an accountability partner. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the first 5 framework. Get out there and start building.